The blood-stained dust swirled around Sarah Locke's boots as she backed against the rough wooden wall of the stage coach station, her trembling hands gripping her father's revolver. Sweat trickled down her temple despite the cool April evening, and her heart pounded with such ferocity she could barely hear the taunts of the three men advancing toward her. "Look at this one, boys," drawled the tallest of the three, his yellow teeth gleaming beneath a scraggly mustache. "Thinks she's some kind of gunslinger." It was 1875 in the Washington Territory, and Sarah had been traveling to Kennewick to claim her late uncle's property when the stagecoach made its scheduled stop at this remote outpost. The other passengers had continued on after a quick meal, but Sarah had stayed behind, waiting for her trunk to be transferred from another coach due to arrive the following morning. Now, as dusk settled over the dusty station yard, she found herself alone with these three strangers whose intentions had become frighteningly clear. "I know how to use this," Sarah warned, raising the Colt revolver higher, trying to keep it steady despite her fear. "My father taught me well." The shortest of the men, a stocky fellow with a nasty scar across his forehead, laughed. "That's so. Well, maybe your daddy should have taught you not to travel alone in these parts. Stay back," Sarah commanded as they continued their approach. Her finger tensed on the trigger, but she hesitated. She'd only ever fired at targets, never at a person. "Now, darlin'," said the third man, his voice deceptively gentle, "why don't you put that gun down before you hurt yourself? We just want to be friendly-like." Sarah's back pressed harder against the wall. There was nowhere to run. The station manager had gone to fetch supplies, leaving her utterly alone. She glanced desperately toward the road, praying for the sight of an approaching rider or wagon. The empty dirt track mocked her hopes. "I said stay back." Her voice cracked as she cocked the hammer. The tall one lunged forward and Sarah fired. The shot went wide, the recoil stronger than she'd anticipated. Before she could recover, the scarred man grabbed for the gun. Sarah twisted away, kicking at his shin and connecting with a satisfying thud. He howled but didn't release her. She fought with everything she had, clawing, kicking, and thrashing as the men tried to subdue her. Her bonnet tore away, sending her chestnut hair tumbling around her shoulders. Despite her resistance, they were overpowering her. Tears of frustration and terror burned in her eyes, but she refused to give up. The crack of another gunshot froze everyone in place. This one hadn't come from Sarah's revolver. "I'd suggest you gentlemen step away from the lady." The voice was deep, steady, and carried an undercurrent of steel. Sarah's gaze shot toward its source. A tall figure stood silhouetted against the setting sun, a rifle aimed directly at her attackers. "This ain't your business, mister," the tall assailant growled, still clutching Sarah's arm. "I'm making it my business." The stranger stepped forward, revealing a lean, muscular frame and a face weathered by sun and wind. His dark blonde hair fell in waves beneath a well-worn Stetson, and his blue eyes held an intensity that made even the scarred man take a step back. "Now, I won't ask again. Let the lady go." For a tense moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, the tall man released Sarah's arm. She immediately stumbled away, retrieving her dropped revolver and backing toward the newcomer. "You're outnumbered," the gentle-voiced attacker pointed out, reaching for the knife at his belt. The stranger's mouth curved into a dangerous smile. "I like those odds better than the lady did." Without lowering his rifle, he said to Sarah, "Madam, would you mind stepping behind me?" Sarah did as he asked, clutching her revolver tightly. From her new position, she could see the stranger more clearly. He wore the practical clothing of a rancher or cowboy: denim trousers, a faded blue shirt, leather vest, and dusty boots with spurs that clinked softly when he moved. "You boys have two choices. the cowboy said calmly. You can turn around, mount up, and ride out of here. Or you can try your luck, and I promise at least one of you won't live to regret it. He shifted his stance slightly. Your decision. The three men exchanged glances. Finally, the tall one spat into the dust. Come on, boys. This piece of calico ain't worth dying over. They backed away slowly, keeping their eyes on the rifle. When they reached their horses tethered at the hitching post, they mounted and rode off, casting dark glances over their shoulders. Only when they were specks on the horizon did the cowboy lower his rifle. He turned to Sarah, concern evident in his blue eyes. Are you hurt, madam? Sarah realized she was trembling. Now that the immediate danger had passed, the shock was setting in. And no, just shaken. She straightened her shoulders, determined not to appear completely helpless. Thank you for your intervention, Mr. Archer, Adam Archer. He touched the brim of his hat. And you're welcome, Miss Locke, Sarah Locke. She smoothed her rumpled skirts with one hand, still clutching the revolver with the other. Adam nodded toward the gun. You handled yourself well. Most would have panicked completely. A humorless laugh escaped her. I was panicking completely. I just didn't want them to know it. His eyes crinkled at the corners. That's a skill in itself. He glanced around the empty station yard. Are you traveling alone, Miss Locke? Sarah hesitated, not wanting to advertise her vulnerability, but there seemed little point in pretense now. Yes. I'm heading to Kennewick to settle my uncle's affairs. He passed last month and left me his property. Adam's eyebrows rose. Samuel Locke was your uncle, you knew him? Sarah asked, surprised. Everyone in Kennewick knew Sam Locke. Good man, I'm sorry for your loss. He paused, looking thoughtful. That property's about 3 miles from my place. Sarah wasn't sure how to respond to this information, so she changed the subject. The stagecoach continued on without me because I'm waiting for my trunk to arrive tomorrow. The station manager went to fetch supplies. She trailed off, realizing how vulnerable she still was. As if reading her thoughts, Adam said, Madam, I don't mean to alarm you further, but those men might circle back once they think I've moved on. I'd feel better if you weren't alone here. Sarah bit her lip. Under normal circumstances, she would never consider leaving with a stranger, no matter how honorable he seemed. But these were hardly normal circumstances. I appreciate your concern, Mr. Archer, but I can take you to Widow Cooper's boarding house in Kennewick, he interrupted. It's respectable, and she can send someone back for your trunk tomorrow. Sarah hesitated. That's very kind, but I wouldn't want to inconvenience you. Adam's expression softened. Miss Locke, I was heading back to town anyway. It's no trouble. He paused, then added quietly, You fought bravely, but you shouldn't have to fight alone. Not here, not now. Something in his tone made Sarah meet his gaze directly. There was compassion there and respect, but no pity or condescension. It was refreshing after the patronizing attitudes she'd encountered since leaving Philadelphia. Those men, she said suddenly. Do you know them? Adam's jaw tightened. I've seen them around. They work for a man named Victor Blackstone who's been buying up land all over the territory. His eyes narrowed. Including properties adjacent to your uncle's. A chill ran through Sarah. You think they know who I am, that I'm here to claim the property? It's possible. Adam checked his rifle before sliding it into the scabbard on his horse. All the more reason not to stay here alone. Sarah made her decision. Very well, Mr. Archer, I accept your offer. He nodded, visibly relieved. Let me help you gather your things. 10 minutes later, Sarah was settled somewhat uncomfortably on Adam's horse, her valise secured behind the saddle. Adam swung up behind her, maintaining a respectful distance while still providing support. Ready, Miss Locke? He asked, his breath warm against her ear. Sarah nodded, trying not to think about how inappropriate this arrangement would seem to her friends back in Philadelphia. But this was the Washington territory, where survival often depended on trusting strangers. As they set off toward Kennewick, the setting sun painting the landscape in hues of gold and crimson, Sarah couldn't help but reflect on the unexpected turn her journey had taken. Just before they crested the first hill, Adam's quiet voice reached her above the steady rhythm of the horse's hooves. "Miss Locke." "Yes, Mr. Archer, you're quite the fighter. But from now on, you'll never have to fight alone again, not in Kennewick." It was a simple statement, not a promise or declaration, yet something about the certainty in his voice made Sarah believe him. As they rode toward Kennewick and whatever awaited her there, she felt, for the first time since leaving Philadelphia, that perhaps she had made the right decision after all. The journey to Kennewick took longer than Sarah expected. Darkness fell quickly, and Adam kept their pace steady rather than pushing the horse too hard with its double burden. The night air grew chilly, and Sarah found herself grateful for Adam's warmth at her back, though she tried not to lean into it. "Not much further," Adam said after they'd been riding in companionable silence for some time. "See those lights ahead? That's the edge of town." Sarah peered through the darkness, making out the faint glow of lanterns and windows. Relief washed over her. Despite Adam's reassuring presence, the memory of her attackers remained fresh, making every shadow and rustle in the underbrush seem threatening. "Is Kennewick a large town?" she asked, more to distract herself than out of genuine curiosity. "Not particularly, but it's growing. We've got a general store, 2 saloons, a hotel, the boarding house where you'll be staying, a church, a doctor." He paused, "and as of last month, a proper sheriff's office." "That sounds quite civilized compared to what I was expecting." Adam chuckled, the sound rumbling through her back. "Don't worry, Miss Locke. It's still wild enough to keep things interesting." As they entered the town, Sarah observed the wooden buildings lining the wide main street. Despite the late hour, several establishments were still illuminated, and the sounds of a piano and raucous laughter drifted from one of the saloons. Adam guided his horse toward a 2-story clapboard house set slightly back from the main street. A sign reading "Cooper's Boarding House" hung from the porch eave, and warm light spilled from the downstairs windows. "Mrs. Cooper keeps respectable hours," Adam said as he dismounted, "but she always leaves a lamp burning for late arrivals." He reached up to help Sarah down, his hands firm around her waist as he lifted her effortlessly to the ground. Sarah smoothed her rumpled traveling dress, suddenly conscious of her disheveled appearance. "I must look a fright," she murmured, attempting to tuck stray hairs back into what remained of her once neat coiffure. Adam's gaze swept over her, appreciation evident in his eyes despite her bedraggled state. "You look like a woman who survived an ordeal with courage and dignity, Miss Locke." Before Sarah could respond to this unexpected compliment, the front door opened, spilling more light onto the porch. A plump, gray-haired woman in a plain dress and white apron stood framed in the doorway. "Adam Archer, is that you skulking around my porch at this hour?" Her tone was scolding but affectionate. "Evening, Mrs. Cooper. Sorry to disturb you, but I've brought a guest who needs lodging." Adam stepped forward, gesturing for Sarah to join him. "This is Miss Sarah Locke, Samuel Locke's niece from Philadelphia. She had some trouble at the stagecoach station." Mrs. Cooper's expression changed instantly from suspicion to concern. "Goodness gracious! Come in, child." She hurried down the steps with surprising agility for a woman of her age and took Sarah's arm. "You poor dear, you must be exhausted and frightened half to death." "I'm quite all right, thanks to Mr. Archer," Sarah assured her, allowing herself to be led toward the house. She glanced back at Adam, who was retrieving her valise from his horse. Of course you are, dear, but you'll be better after a hot meal and a good night's sleep, Mrs. Cooper said firmly. She looked back at Adam. And what exactly was this trouble at the station, Adam? Adam's expression darkened. 3 of Blackstone's men, they were, bothering Miss Locke when I happened upon them. Mrs. Cooper's lips pressed into a thin line. That man, getting bolder by the day he is. She tightened her grip on Sarah's arm protectively. Well, you're safe now, Miss Locke. I've got a nice room ready, and there's still some stew keeping warm on the stove. Adam followed them into a cozy parlor furnished with well-worn but clean furniture. A fire crackled in the hearth, dispelling the night's chill. He set Sarah's valise down and cleared his throat. I'll be heading to the sheriff's office to report the incident, Miss Locke. He twisted his hat in his hands. Sheriff Daniels will likely want to speak with you tomorrow if that's agreeable. Sarah nodded. Of course, and thank you again, Mr. Archer. I hate to think what might have happened if you hadn't come along. A shadow crossed his face. I'm just glad I was passing by. He settled his hat back on his head. Mrs. Cooper, could you arrange for someone to fetch Miss Locke's trunk from the station tomorrow? Already thinking ahead, as usual, Mrs. Cooper said with approval. My son can go first thing in the morning. Adam nodded, satisfied. Good. He turned back to Sarah, something unreadable in his eyes. Rest well, Miss Locke. I'll call on you tomorrow afternoon if that's acceptable. We can discuss your uncle's property. That would be most helpful, thank you. With a tip of his hat, Adam took his leave, the door closing softly behind him. Mrs. Cooper immediately began fussing over Sarah, insisting she sit by the fire while she fetched that bowl of stew. Left alone momentarily, Sarah sank into a comfortable armchair, the events of the day catching up to her. The attack, Adam's timely rescue, the ride to Kennewick, it all seemed surreal now, like something from one of those dime novels her younger brother devoured back home. Except this was her reality now. She'd come west to claim her inheritance, expecting challenges, certainly, but nothing like this. Uncle Samuel's letters had painted Kennewick as a growing, prosperous town with opportunity for those willing to work. He'd never mentioned men like Blackstone or the dangers a woman alone might face. Mrs. Cooper returned with a steaming bowl of stew and a thick slice of bread. Eat up, dear. You'll feel stronger with something in your stomach. Sarah hadn't realized how hungry she was until the aroma of the savory stew reached her. She ate gratefully while Mrs. Cooper bustled about, preparing a room upstairs. Your Mr. Archer is a good man, Mrs. Cooper remarked when she returned. One of the best in Kennewick, though he keeps to himself mostly. He's hardly my Mr. Archer, Sarah corrected gently, feeling a blush rise to her cheeks. Mrs. Cooper smiled knowingly. Perhaps not yet, dear. But I've known Adam Archer for 5 years now, and I've never seen him look at a woman the way he looked at you. Before Sarah could protest further, Mrs. Cooper continued, Now, tell me about yourself, Miss Locke. Samuel mentioned his niece from Philadelphia in his letters, but he didn't share many details. Grateful for the change of subject, Sarah explained her situation, how she'd been working as a teacher in Philadelphia when news of her uncle's death reached her. With both parents gone and her younger brother recently married, there had been little to keep her in the East. Uncle Samuel's bequest of his property, including a small ranch and some additional land, had seemed like Providence offering a new direction for her life. I've always been drawn to the West, Sarah admitted. The freedom, the opportunity. Uncle Samuel's letters made it sound almost magical. It can be, Mrs. Cooper agreed, but it can also be harsh and unforgiving. Samuel was right to encourage you, though. You seem to have the spirit needed to thrive here. She patted Sarah's hand. And now you should get some rest. You've had quite enough excitement for one day. Sarah couldn't argue with that, following Mrs. Cooper upstairs. She was shown to a small but comfortable room with a brass bed, a washstand, and a chest of drawers. A colorful quilt adorned the bed, and curtains framed the window overlooking the main street. "Bathrooms at the end of the hall," Mrs. Cooper explained. "There's fresh water in the pitcher and towels in the drawer. Breakfast is served from 6 to 8. She paused at the door. "Sleep well, Miss Locke. You're safe here." When Mrs. Cooper had gone, Sarah sank onto the edge of the bed, suddenly overwhelmed. She'd been so focused on reaching Kennewick, on claiming her inheritance and starting anew, that she hadn't truly considered the challenges ahead. Today's events had been a stark reminder of just how unprepared she really was. And yet, there was Adam Archer, appearing like some hero from a storybook just when she needed him most. His words echoed in her mind. "You'll never have to fight alone again. Not in Kennewick." It was a lovely sentiment, but Sarah knew better than to rely on others for her security. Tomorrow, she would thank him properly for his assistance, then politely establish the boundaries necessary for a single woman in her position. The last thing she needed was to become the subject of gossip in her new home. With that resolution firmly in mind, Sarah prepared for bed, her thoughts drifting to what the morning might bring and to a pair of intense blue eyes that had looked at her with such unexpected admiration. Morning arrived with golden sunlight streaming through the curtains and the aroma of coffee and bacon wafting up from below. Sarah woke feeling more refreshed than she would have thought possible after the previous day's ordeal. She dressed in one of her simpler dresses, a practical blue cotton with minimal bustle, and arranged her hair in a simple knot at the nape of her neck. When she descended to the dining room, she found 4 other boarders already at breakfast. 2 older gentlemen she learned were railroad surveyors, a young woman who worked at the general store, and a middle-aged woman introduced as the town schoolteacher. "Miss Locke will be taking over Samuel's property," Mrs. Cooper explained as she served Sarah a generous plate of eggs, bacon, and biscuits. "Samuel Locke's place?" The schoolteacher, Mrs. Hollister, raised her eyebrows. "That's quite an undertaking for a young woman alone." "I'm not afraid of hard work," Sarah replied evenly, spreading butter on a biscuit. "Oh, it's not the work I'm thinking of," Mrs. Hollister said. "It's the location. With Blackstone buying up everything around it, now, Harriet, Mrs. Cooper interrupted firmly. "Let Miss Locke enjoy her breakfast before you start in with all that." Mrs. Hollister looked like she wanted to say more, but settled for giving Sarah a meaningful look before returning to her meal. After breakfast, Sarah met Mrs. Cooper's son, Thomas, a burly young man with his mother's kind eyes, who was preparing to retrieve her trunk from the stage-coach station. Sarah provided him with the claim ticket and a description of the trunk, feeling another wave of gratitude toward Adam for suggesting this arrangement. With nothing else to do until her belongings arrived, Sarah decided to explore Kennewick. Mrs. Cooper offered to accompany her, but Sarah politely declined, assuring the older woman she would stay within the town limits and return well before dark. Kennewick in daylight was a bustling community, larger and more established than Sarah had expected. The main street featured wooden sidewalks fronting a variety of businesses: the general store, a millinery, a bank, the hotel, and several other establishments, including the 2 saloons Adam had mentioned. People nodded politely as she passed, several offering curious glances that suggested news of her arrival had already spread. Sarah made her way to the general store, thinking to purchase a few necessities until her trunk arrived. The bell jingled cheerfully as she entered, and she was immediately enveloped in the distinctive blend of aromas that seemed universal to such establishments: coffee, leather, tobacco, and spices. "Good morning," greeted a middle-aged man behind the counter. You must be Miss Locke. Word travels fast in Kennewick. He wiped his hands on his apron and extended one. Walter Green, this is my establishment. Pleased to meet you, Mr. Green, Sarah replied, shaking his hand. I see Mrs. Cooper wasn't exaggerating when she said news spreads quickly here. Mr. Green chuckled. No secrets in a town this size, I'm afraid, especially when it involves Samuel Locke's niece arriving in the company of Adam Archer after some trouble at the stagecoach station. Sarah felt her cheeks warm. I see the details have spread as well. Only that there was trouble and Archer stepped in, he assured her. The specifics remain a mystery, which means folks are filling in the blanks with all manner of speculation. His eyes twinkled. You might want to set the record straight before someone decides you two fought off a band of renegade Indians or a pack of wolves. Despite her embarrassment, Sarah had to laugh. Nothing so dramatic, I assure you, though Mr. Archer was indeed quite heroic. She changed the subject by asking about items she needed, and Mr. Green was happy to assist her. As she was making her purchases, the store's door opened, and a tall, imposing man in an expensive suit entered. The good-natured hum of conversation in the store immediately dampened. Sarah noticed Mr. Green's friendly expression turn guarded. Miss Locke, he said quietly, may I introduce Mr. Victor Blackstone? Sarah felt a chill run through her. This was the man Adam had mentioned, the one whose men had attacked her. She straightened her shoulders and turned to face him. Blackstone was perhaps 50, with silver-streaked dark hair and cold gray eyes that assessed her with undisguised interest. He removed his hat, revealing a high forehead and sharply chiseled features that might have been handsome if not for the calculating hardness in his expression. Miss Locke, he said, his voice cultured and smooth. What a pleasure to meet Samuel's niece at last. He extended his hand. Victor Blackstone, I had business dealings with your uncle. Sarah hesitated only momentarily before taking his hand. Mr. Blackstone, I understand you've been acquiring property in the area. A flicker of surprise crossed his face at her directness, quickly replaced by an oily smile. Indeed. I have a vision for the Washington territory that requires consolidation of resources. He studied her face. I was sorry to hear of your uncle's passing. Samuel was resistant to progress. My uncle was a principled man, Sarah replied coolly. Principles are admirable, Blackstone said, but they don't always account for reality. The frontier is changing, Miss Locke. Railroad expansion, new settlements. The future belongs to those who adapt. Sarah met his gaze steadily. I look forward to being part of that future, Mr. Blackstone. His smile didn't reach his eyes. I'd be most interested in discussing your plans for your uncle's property. Perhaps over dinner at the hotel this evening. Before Sarah could respond, the store's door opened again, and Adam Archer stepped inside. He stopped short at the sight of Blackstone, his expression hardening. Archer, Blackstone acknowledged with a slight nod. I was just inviting Miss Locke to dinner to discuss business matters. Adam moved to stand beside Sarah, not quite touching her but close enough that she could sense his protective stance. Miss Locke already has plans this evening, he said evenly. Sheriff Daniels needs to take her statement about yesterday's incident. Blackstone's eyes narrowed fractionally. Incident? Your men, Adam said bluntly. At the stagecoach station, a flash of something anger, concern, crossed Blackstone's face before his smooth mask slipped back into place. I employ many men, Archer. I can hardly be held responsible for their every action when off duty. They were wearing your brand, Adam countered. Blackstone waved a dismissive hand. A regrettable misunderstanding, I'm sure. If any of my employees behaved inappropriately, they'll be disciplined. He turned back to Sarah. My apologies if you were inconvenienced, Miss Locke. All the more reason for us to start fresh. Perhaps tomorrow evening instead. Sarah drew herself up to her full height, which still left her looking up at both men. Thank you for the invitation, Mr. Blackstone, but I'll be quite busy settling into my uncle's property. Perhaps another time. Blackstone's smile thinned. As you wish, but my offer to discuss the property remains open. I think you'll find my terms most generous. He replaced his hat and nodded to them both. Good day. After he left, the atmosphere in the store seemed to lighten. Mr. Green let out a low whistle. Well handled, Miss Locke. Not many stand up to Blackstone like that. He doesn't intimidate me, Sarah said, though in truth, something about the man had unsettled her deeply. Adam's expression was grim. He should. Blackstone doesn't take rejection well, especially not in public. He turned to her, his blue eyes serious. I came to tell you that your trunk arrived safely at Mrs. Cooper's. I thought perhaps you'd like to see your uncle's property this afternoon if you're feeling up to it after yesterday. Sarah nodded, grateful for the change of subject. I'd appreciate that very much, Mr. Archer. Good. I'll come by around 2 o'clock with a buggy. He hesitated, then added, and Miss Locke, it might be wise not to wander too far alone, at least until you're more familiar with Kennewick and its politics. Under normal circumstances, Sarah might have bristled at such advice, viewing it as an attempt to restrict her independence. But after yesterday's attack and today's encounter with Blackstone, she recognized it as sensible caution. I'll bear that in mind, Mr. Archer. Thank you. Adam seemed relieved at her acceptance. With a nod to her and Mr. Green, he departed, leaving Sarah to finish her shopping. As she selected the items she needed, she couldn't help but wonder what she had gotten herself into. Uncle Samuel's letters had never mentioned any conflict with Blackstone or tension in the community. Had he been trying to shield her, or had the situation deteriorated after his death? Either way, she was here now, and she had no intention of being frightened away, not by Blackstone, not by his men, not by anything. Uncle Samuel had believed she had the strength to make a life here, and she was determined to prove him right. When she returned to the boarding house, her trunk had indeed arrived and been placed in her room. As she unpacked her belongings, Sarah found herself looking forward to the afternoon with a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. Soon she would see her inheritance, the property that represented her future. And she would be spending more time with Adam Archer, a man who intrigued her more than she cared to admit. At precisely 2 o'clock, Adam arrived at Mrs. Cooper's in a well-maintained buggy drawn by a handsome bay mare. Sarah was ready, dressed in a practical riding outfit of dark green that she hoped struck the right balance between propriety and functionality. She had added a small hat with a modest veil, both for sun protection and to lend a touch of feminine elegance. Mrs. Cooper saw her to the door, pressing a small basket into her hands. Some bread and preserves, she explained. The house has been empty since Samuel passed, so there won't be much in the way of provisions. Adam helped Sarah into the buggy, his strong hands steadying her as she climbed up. Once she was settled, he took his place beside her and set the horse in motion with a gentle flick of the reins. "Your trunk arrived without incident?" he asked as they headed out of town. "Yes, thank you for arranging that." Sarah adjusted her gloves. "And thank you for intervening at the store this morning. Mr. Blackstone is not what I expected." "Few are prepared for Blackstone their first time meeting him," Adam replied grimly. "He came to the territory about 3 years ago with money from back east and grand plans for development. At first, most folks welcomed him. He brought investment, jobs, promises of railroad connections. But," Sarah prompted when he paused, "but his methods grew increasingly aggressive. He started buying land at fair prices. Then when people realized how much he wanted, they began refusing to sell. That's when the accidents started happening: barn fires, livestock dying mysteriously, water sources contaminated. Sarah frowned. Nothing that could be directly traced to him, I presume. Adam nodded, looking impressed at her quick understanding. Exactly. And when a property owner suffered enough bad luck, Blackstone would appear with an offer much lower than his original one, but enough to let the victim start over somewhere else. That's despicable, Sarah said, anger flaring. Why hasn't anyone stopped him? No proof. And until recently, we didn't have a proper sheriff, just a town marshal who was more interested in breaking up saloon fights than investigating Blackstone. Adam's jaw tightened. Sheriff Daniels is different. He's been building a case, but Blackstone is careful. They fell silent as the buggy crested a hill, and suddenly the landscape opened before them: rolling hills covered with golden grass, stands of pine and fir in the distance, and the blue ribbon of the Columbia River winding through the valley. It's beautiful, Sarah breathed. Adam smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him today. This is why people come west, Miss Locke. Space, freedom, possibility. He pointed to their left. My land starts at that fence line and extends about 2 miles that way. Sarah tried to envision it. What do you raise, Mr. Archer? Horses, primarily, some cattle. There was pride in his voice. I've been building up a breeding program for quality stock. It's starting to gain recognition. That's impressive, Sarah said sincerely. Did you establish the ranch yourself? Adam nodded. 5 years ago. Came west with nothing but determination, and the knowledge I'd gained working on other people's ranches since I was 14. He glanced at her. Your uncle was one of the few who encouraged me. Most thought I'd fail within a year. This glimpse into Adam's past intrigued Sarah. There was clearly much more to his story, but before she could ask another question, he gestured ahead. There it is, Willow Creek Ranch. Sarah followed his gaze to a modest but well-built house nestled among several cottonwood trees. A small barn and corral stood nearby, and a creek, presumably the Willow Creek that gave the property its name, wound through the pasture beyond. It wasn't grand by any means, but there was something immediately appealing about its proportions and setting. As they approached, Sarah's eyes filled unexpectedly with tears. This had been Uncle Samuel's home, the place from which he'd written those warm-hearted, encouraging letters. Now it was hers. Adam slowed the buggy as they reached the gate, seeming to sense her emotional response. Your uncle was proud of this place, he said quietly. Built most of it himself. Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice. Adam jumped down and opened the gate, then drove the buggy through and up to the house. When he helped her down, his hands lingered at her waist a moment longer than strictly necessary. Thank you, she murmured, acutely aware of his closeness. Adam cleared his throat and stepped back. Let's see if the key works. Sheriff Daniels had the place locked up after the funeral. Sarah retrieved the key from her reticule, sent to her along with Uncle Samuel's will, and approached the front door. It turned easily in the lock, and the door swung open with only a slight creak. Inside, the house was simple but comfortable: a main room with a stone fireplace, a kitchen area to one side, and doors leading to what Sarah assumed were bedrooms. Everything was neat and covered with a fine layer of dust. Afternoon sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating motes dancing in the air. It's perfect, Sarah said softly. Adam moved past her to open windows, letting in fresh air. It needs some work, he cautioned. Samuel had plans to expand the kitchen and add another bedroom, but his health started failing last winter. I didn't know he was ill, Sarah said, running a hand along the solid wooden table that dominated the main room. His letters never mentioned it. That was Samuel never wanted to worry anyone. Adam's expression softened. He talked about you often, though, was real proud when you became a teacher. This touched Sarah deeply. He encouraged me when my parents thought it improper for a young woman to pursue education beyond what was needed to secure a husband. Adam's mouth quirked into a half-smile. Samuel had unconventional ideas about women's capabilities. Said his niece had more sense and determination than most men he knew. He was biased, Sarah said, but she couldn't help feeling pleased. They continued exploring the house, Adam pointing out features and explaining some of Samuel's innovations. The back door opened onto a small garden, now overgrown but still showing the neat rows Uncle Samuel had planted. He was particularly proud of his tomatoes, Adam remarked as they surveyed the tangled vines. Beyond the garden lay the barn and corral. Inside the barn, they found tack hanging neatly on pegs and stalls that had been mucked out and filled with fresh straw. "I've been checking on things," Adam explained when Sarah commented on the barn's maintained condition. "Feeding the chickens, making sure the place didn't fall apart." Sarah turned to him, deeply moved. "That was incredibly thoughtful, Mr. Archer. I don't know how to thank you." "Adam," he said suddenly. "I think under the circumstances you might call me Adam." His blue eyes held hers, and Sarah felt a flutter in her stomach that had nothing to do with hunger or fatigue. "Then you must call me Sarah," she replied, her voice not quite steady. A moment stretched between them, taut with unspoken possibilities. Then Adam cleared his throat and gestured toward a small paddock behind the barn. Samuel kept a good riding horse and a plow horse. After he passed, I moved them to my place for proper care. I can bring them back whenever you're ready. The practicality of this statement brought Sarah back to reality. There was so much to consider: livestock, crops, maintaining the property. Could she truly manage all this alone? As if reading her thoughts, Adam said, "It's a lot to take in, I know, but you don't have to decide everything today. And you won't be without help." "I appreciate that," Sarah said, genuinely grateful, "though I don't want to impose on your kindness indefinitely. It's not an imposition." Adam's voice was firm. "Samuel was good to me when I was starting out, taught me a lot about ranching in this territory. I'd be a poor excuse for a neighbor if I didn't return the favor." They returned to the house, and Sarah unpacked Mrs. Cooper's basket in the kitchen. Adam built a small fire in the fireplace to take the chill off the air, and they shared a simple meal of bread, preserves, and coffee that Adam prepared using supplies he'd thoughtfully brought along. As they sat at the kitchen table, the late afternoon light casting long shadows across the floor, Sarah found herself relaxing in Adam's company. He was easy to talk to, knowledgeable without being condescending, and seemed genuinely interested in her thoughts about the property. "The land extends about a mile in that direction," he explained, pointing west through the window. "It includes good water access and some excellent grazing land. Samuel ran about 30 head of cattle and grew enough crops to be mostly self-sufficient." "That sounds manageable," Sarah said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. Her knowledge of farming and ranching was largely theoretical, gleaned from books and her uncle's letters. Adam hesitated, then said carefully, "There's another option if you're not set on ranching yourself. You could lease the grazing land to neighboring ranchers like me, for instance. It would provide steady income while you decide what direction you want to take." Sarah considered this. "That's not a bad idea, at least initially. I have much to learn before I could run a successful operation." "You'd learn quickly," Adam said with unexpected conviction. "Samuel always said you had a quick mind. Nevertheless, I'm not too proud to acknowledge my limitations." Sarah set down her coffee cup. I'd be interested in discussing lease terms if you're serious about the offer. I am. Adam looked pleased. We can work out the details later. For now, let's finish showing you the property boundaries so you know exactly what you've inherited. They spent another hour walking the perimeter of the ranch, Adam pointing out landmarks and explaining the seasonal patterns of the land. By the time they returned to the buggy, the sun was beginning to set, painting the landscape in rich golds and purples. "We should head back," Adam said, helping Sarah into the buggy once more. "Mrs. Cooper worries if her boarders aren't in by dark." As they drove back toward town, Sarah found herself reluctant for the day to end. Despite the complications with Blackstone and the daunting prospect of managing the ranch, she felt more at peace than she had in months. There was something about this land, about Kennewick. And yes, perhaps something about the man beside her that made her feel as though she had found where she belonged. "Adam," she said as the lights of town came into view, "thank you for today, for everything." He glanced at her, his expression soft in the fading light. "You're welcome, Sarah. I meant what I said yesterday. You're not alone here." The way he said her name with such gentle emphasis made Sarah's heart beat a little faster. She knew it was too soon, too impulsive to be feeling such attraction to a man she barely knew. And yet, there was an undeniable connection between them that seemed to transcend their brief acquaintance. As they pulled up to Mrs. Cooper's boarding house, Sarah resolved to be sensible. She needed time to establish herself, to understand the community dynamics, to be sure of her own mind. Rushing into anything would be foolish. Adam helped her down from the buggy, his hands strong and steady. "Sheriff Daniels would like to see you tomorrow morning about your statement," he said. "I can escort you to his office at 9 if that suits you." "That would be fine," Sarah agreed. For a moment they stood facing each other in the gathering dusk, neither quite ready to say goodnight. Then Mrs. Cooper opened the front door, spilling lamplight onto the porch. "There you are. I was beginning to worry," she called. "Dinner's nearly ready." The spell broken, Sarah took a step back. "Good night, Adam. Thank you again for today." "Good night, Sarah." He touched the brim of his hat. "Until tomorrow." As Sarah watched him drive away, she felt both a sense of loss and a flutter of anticipation for the morning. Whatever was developing between them, it seemed both inevitable and right, like the changing of seasons or the flow of a river to the sea. What she couldn't know was how quickly their budding connection would be tested, or how soon she would need to call upon the courage that had impressed him so greatly at their first meeting. The following week passed in a whirlwind of activity for Sarah. Her statement to Sheriff Daniels had been straightforward but uncomfortable, requiring her to recount the attack in detail. The sheriff, a serious man with kind eyes, had assured her he would investigate thoroughly, though he cautioned that without evidence directly linking Blackstone to his men's actions, there was little he could do officially. "Just be watchful, Miss Locke," he'd advised. "Blackstone doesn't give up easily when he wants something." Adam had been present throughout the interview, his steady presence reassuring. Afterward, he'd helped her open an account at the Kennewick Bank and introduced her to key figures in the community: the doctor, the bank manager, the minister, and his wife. Everyone had been welcoming, though Sarah detected an undercurrent of curiosity and, from some, wariness about her plans for Uncle Samuel's property. By the end of the week, Sarah had moved from Mrs. Cooper's boarding house to Willow Creek Ranch. Adam had brought over her uncle's horses, as promised, a gentle mare named Daisy, and a sturdy gelding called Buck, along with a small flock of chickens that had been temporarily housed at his ranch. He'd also helped her make arrangements with the general store for regular deliveries of supplies, and introduced her to Miguel Vasquez, a capable young man who agreed to help with the heavier ranch work, 3 days a week. Now, as Sarah sat on the front porch of her new home watching the sunset, she marveled at how quickly Kennewick was becoming familiar. The initial strangeness of frontier life was fading, replaced by a growing sense of belonging. The sound of hoofbeats drew her attention to the road, where Adam was approaching on horseback. He'd been a constant presence this past week, offering guidance and practical help without ever making her feel incompetent or dependent. Their conversations had flowed easily, ranging from books they'd both read to their visions for the future of the territory. "Evening, Sarah," he called as he dismounted. "Hope I'm not disturbing your peace." Sarah smiled, genuinely pleased to see him. "Not at all. I was just contemplating how much has changed in a week." Adam tied his horse to the hitching post and joined her on the porch, settling into the chair beside hers. "Feeling settled, more than I expected to," she admitted, "though I still have moments of wondering what I've gotten myself into." His chuckle was warm in the fading light. "That feeling never entirely goes away out here. The West has a way of keeping folks humble." They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching as the last rays of sun painted the distant hills. Finally, Adam shifted in his chair, his expression turning serious. "I heard something in town today that concerns me," he said. "Thought you should know." Sarah tensed. "About Blackstone," Adam nodded. "He's been telling people he's offering you a generous price for the ranch, creating the impression that any reasonable person would accept." "But he hasn't made me any offer at all," Sarah protested. "That's his tactic. He's laying groundwork, making it seem like you're being stubborn or unreasonable when you refuse." Adam's jaw tightened. "If public opinion turns against you, he knows you'll be more isolated, more vulnerable." Sarah considered this. "So he's trying to manipulate the community against me before I've even had a chance to become part of it." "Exactly." Adam looked impressed at her quick grasp of the situation. "Sheriff Daniels thinks it's important that people see you as committed to Kennewick, not just passing through or looking to make a quick profit." "What would you suggest?" "The town's founding anniversary celebration is next Saturday," Adam said. "Everyone will be there. It would be a good opportunity for people to get to know you better." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "I'd planned to attend, but I suppose I could be more deliberately sociable." "There's something else," Adam added, looking slightly uncomfortable. "The celebration includes a dance in the evening. It might, well, it might help cement your position if you appear to have social connections, strong ones." Sarah felt her cheeks warm as she understood his implication. "Are you asking to escort me to the dance, Mr. Archer?" The formality made him smile. "I believe I am, Miss Locke." "Then I accept," she said, returning his smile. "Though I should warn you, my dancing skills are limited to what was taught in Philadelphia finishing schools. I'm not familiar with Western styles." "I'll teach you," he promised, his eyes holding hers. "It's not so different, just a bit livelier." Something in his gaze made Sarah's pulse quicken. Over the past week, their interactions had remained largely proper, with only occasional moments of lingering glances or hands touching longer than necessary. But the attraction between them was undeniable and growing stronger with each meeting. Adam cleared his throat, breaking the charged moment. "There's another reason I came by. I've drawn up a proposed lease agreement for the grazing land we discussed." He reached into his vest pocket and withdrew a folded document. "Take your time reviewing it. If the terms seem fair, we can make it official at the bank next week." Sarah accepted the paper. "Thank you. I'll read it carefully. I've included a clause that allows you to terminate with reasonable notice if you decide to use the land yourself," he explained. "I don't want you to feel locked in." This consideration touched her. "That's very thoughtful." Adam stood, seeming reluctant to leave but aware of propriety. I should get back before dark. Is there anything you need before I go? Sarah shook her head. Miguel helped me stock up on supplies yesterday. I'm well provided for. Good. Adam hesitated, then added, Sheriff Daniels mentioned he's been riding by here on his evening rounds, just as a precaution. I've noticed, Sarah said. He stopped briefly last night to check that all was well. She appreciated the protection, though she didn't want to appear fearful. I've also been practicing with Uncle Samuel's revolver. I'm becoming quite accurate. Adam's expression was a mixture of approval and concern. Good, though I hope you never need to use it. He stepped off the porch and untied his horse. I'll see you Sunday for church then. Most folks in Kennewick attend the morning service. I'll be there, Sarah promised. As she watched him ride away, Sarah reflected on how quickly Adam Archer was becoming essential to her life in Kennewick. It wasn't just his practical help or protection, though both were valuable. It was the way he respected her intelligence and independence while still offering support. The way he looked at her as if truly seeing her, not just as a woman in need of assistance, but as a person of worth and capability. It was, she admitted to herself, increasingly difficult to keep her feelings strictly proper and sensible. Inside the house, Sarah lit the lamps as darkness fell, then settled at the kitchen table to read the lease agreement Adam had prepared. It was straightforward and, as far as she could determine, entirely fair, perhaps even generous in its terms. The rental income would be enough to support her comfortably while she established herself and decided how best to utilize the property. Later, as she prepared for bed, Sarah thought about the upcoming dance and what it might mean for her relationship with Adam. In Philadelphia, accepting a man's escort to a public event would be seen as tacit acknowledgement of a courtship. Was it the same here in Kennewick? And if so, was she ready for such a step? The answer came more easily than she expected. Yes, she was ready, eager, even to explore what might develop between them. Adam Archer was unlike any man she'd met before, combining strength with gentleness, confidence with respect. When she was with him, she felt both protected and empowered, a combination she hadn't known was possible. As she drifted toward sleep, Sarah's last thought was of Adam's words on that first terrifying day. You'll never have to fight alone again. It had seemed merely reassuring then. Now, it felt like a promise of something deeper, something enduring, something she was beginning to want with all her heart. Sunday morning dawned clear and bright. Sarah dressed with extra care in her best church dress, a modest but becoming creation of deep blue silk with white lace at the collar and cuffs. She arranged her hair in a more elaborate style than usual, securing it with tortoiseshell combs that had belonged to her mother. Miguel arrived early as arranged to hitch Daisy to the small buggy Uncle Samuel had kept for trips to town. Though Sarah was learning to handle the buggy herself, she was grateful for Miguel's assistance today, allowing her to keep her appearance neat for church. "You look very pretty, Miss Locke," Miguel commented as he helped her into the buggy. Sarah smiled at the young man. At 19, Miguel was earnest and hardworking, eager to learn ranch management so he could someday have a place of his own. "Thank you, Miguel. Will your family be at church today?" He nodded, his expression brightening. All of us. My sister Anna has been asking when you might visit. She is curious about Philadelphia." "I'd be delighted to meet her," Sarah said. Miguel had spoken often of his family, his parents who worked on one of the larger ranches, and his 4 siblings, especially Anna, who at 17 was apparently as bright and ambitious as her brother. As they drove toward town, Sarah felt a flutter of nervous anticipation. Church services would be her first truly public appearance in Kennewick, beyond the necessary visits to shops and the bank. It would be an opportunity to meet more of the community at once and to be seen with Adam in a social context. The small white church at the edge of town was already surrounded by buggies and horses when they arrived. People stood in groups outside, conversing in the warm morning sunshine before the service began. Sarah recognized some faces from her brief time in town: Mr. Green from the general store, Mrs. Hollister the schoolteacher, Sheriff Daniels and his wife. As Miguel helped her down from the buggy, Sarah scanned the crowd for Adam. She spotted him near the church steps, engaged in conversation with a distinguished-looking older man. Adam glanced up at that moment, his eyes finding hers across the churchyard. The smile that spread across his face caused several heads to turn and follow his gaze. Conscious of the attention, Sarah moved toward him with measured steps, nodding politely to those she passed. By the time she reached Adam, most of the congregation was watching with undisguised interest. "Good morning, Sarah," Adam said warmly, taking her gloved hand briefly in his. "You look lovely." "Thank you," she replied, acutely aware of the audience. "Good morning." Adam turned to include the older man in their greeting. "Judge Wilson, may I present Miss Sarah Locke, Samuel Locke's niece from Philadelphia." "Sarah, this is Judge Elias Wilson, who oversees the territorial court in this district." The judge, a tall man with silver hair and shrewd blue eyes, bowed slightly. "A pleasure to meet you, Miss Locke. Samuel was a good friend. He spoke of you often and with great pride." "The pleasure is mine, Judge Wilson," Sarah responded. "I hope I can live up to my uncle's faith in me." "From what I've observed so far, you're doing admirably," the judge said with approval. "Not everyone would have the courage to take on a frontier property, especially given the complications." Sarah understood he was referring to Blackstone's interest in her land. "I believe in finishing what one starts, Judge Wilson, and I find I'm quite taken with Kennewick." "We're fortunate to have you," the judge replied. He glanced meaningfully at Adam. "Some of us more than others, perhaps." Adam cleared his throat. "Shall we go inside? The service will be starting soon." As they entered the church, Sarah was aware of whispers and glances following them. Adam guided her to a pew midway down the aisle, and heads turned as they passed. Sarah held herself with dignity, mindful that first impressions would be lasting ones. The service was simple but heartfelt, led by Reverend Thomas, a younger man than Sarah had expected, with an earnest manner and thoughtful sermon. The congregation sang hymns with enthusiasm, if not always perfect harmony, and Sarah found herself moved by the genuine community spirit evident in the small church. Afterward, on the steps outside, it seemed everyone wanted to meet Samuel's niece. Adam stayed by her side as a steady stream of townspeople came forward to introduce themselves. Many offered condolences about her uncle, along with stories of his kindness or humor. Others extended invitations to social gatherings or offers of assistance should she need anything. Sarah was touched by the warmth of the welcome, though she noticed a few held back, watching her with calculation rather than friendliness. These, she suspected, were aligned with Blackstone's interests. "Miss Locke," called a melodious voice. Sarah turned to see a beautiful young woman approaching, accompanied by Miguel. "I am Ana Vasquez, Miguel's sister. He has told me so much about you." Ana was indeed lovely, with glossy dark hair, expressive brown eyes, and a graceful manner that belied her youth. Sarah took an immediate liking to her. "I'm delighted to meet you, Ana. Your brother has been invaluable to me this past week." Ana beamed. "He says you are teaching him about business, how to keep accounts and manage a property properly. It is very kind of you." "Not at all," Sarah said sincerely. "Miguel has a quick mind. I'm merely sharing what knowledge I have." She glanced at Adam. Mr. Archer has been teaching us both about ranching specifics. Anna's gaze shifted to Adam, and Sarah didn't miss the flash of admiration in the girl's eyes. Mr. Archer is a good teacher, Anna said respectfully. My father says his horse breeding program is the most progressive in the territory. Adam looked slightly embarrassed by the praise. Your father is too generous. I'm still learning myself. Their conversation was interrupted by the appearance of Victor Blackstone, immaculately dressed and flanked by two men Sarah recognized with a chill as being among her attackers at the stage coach station, the tall one with the yellow teeth and the scarred one. The third man was nowhere to be seen. Miss Locke, Blackstone said smoothly, ignoring the sudden tension. How delightful to see you settling into our community. I trust you're finding everything satisfactory at your uncle's modest homestead. Sarah felt Adam stiffen beside her but kept her own composure. Quite satisfactory, Mr. Blackstone. Uncle Samuel created something truly special at Willow Creek. Indeed. Blackstone's smile didn't reach his eyes. Though I imagine it must be quite a change from Philadelphia society, the isolation alone would be challenging for a woman of refinement. Before Sarah could respond, Adam spoke, his voice deceptively casual. Sarah's not isolated, Blackstone. She has friends, neighbors, people who look out for one another. The emphasis on the last sentence wasn't lost on Blackstone. His expression hardened briefly before the smooth mask slipped back into place. How fortunate for Miss Locke. He turned his attention back to Sarah. I do hope you'll reconsider my dinner invitation. I have a business proposition that would solve many of the challenges you're facing. Miss Locke has commitments, Adam said firmly, including attending the Founders' Day celebration with me on Saturday. Blackstone's eyebrows rose a fraction. Indeed. Well, perhaps I'll have an opportunity to speak with you there, Miss Locke. He tipped his hat. Good day. As Blackstone and his men moved away, Sarah released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. He's more intimidating than I initially realized, she admitted quietly. He cultivates that impression, Adam replied, his eyes following Blackstone's retreating figure. The men with him, they were at the stage coach station, Sarah nodded. Two of them, yes. The third isn't here. Hank Leary, Adam said grimly. He's Blackstone's enforcer, mean as a rattlesnake and twice as dangerous. He glanced down at her concerned face and softened his tone. Don't worry. Sheriff Daniels is keeping an eye on him. Anna, who had remained silent during the exchange with Blackstone, spoke up hesitantly. Miss Locke, my mother asked if you might join our family for Sunday dinner. It is nothing fancy, but she makes very good enchiladas. Sarah was touched by the invitation. I'd be honored, Anna. Thank you. Mr. Archer is also welcome, Anna added with a shy glance at Adam. Adam smiled at the girl. Thank you, Anna. I accept with pleasure. The Vasquez family lived in a modest but well-kept adobe house on the outskirts of town. The interior was filled with colorful textiles and the delicious aroma of Mrs. Vasquez's cooking. Sarah was welcomed warmly by Miguel's parents and introduced to his younger siblings, twin boys of about 12, and a little girl, no more than 6, who regarded Sarah with wide-eyed fascination. Throughout the meal, Sarah was struck by the family's closeness and the respect with which they treated one another. Mr. Vasquez clearly valued his wife's opinions, consulting her on various matters and deferring to her expertise regarding the children. This was refreshing compared to many Eastern households Sarah had known, where wives were treated more as decorative possessions than partners. Adam was clearly comfortable with the family, teasing the twins good-naturedly and complimenting Mrs. Vasquez on her cooking. Sarah found herself watching him when he wasn't looking, admiring the easy way he interacted with everyone from the youngest child to the eldest adult. After the meal, while the women cleared the table, Sarah overheard a serious conversation between Adam and Mr. Vasquez. "Blackstone approached Miguel again yesterday," Mr. Vasquez said quietly. "Offered him twice what Miss Locke is paying to come work for him instead." Adam's expression darkened. "What did Miguel say?" "He refused, of course. He gave his word to Miss Locke." Mr. Vasquez shook his head. "But I worry, Adam. Blackstone doesn't take rejection well." "I know," Adam replied grimly. "Tell Miguel to be careful, and if anything happens, anything at all, he should report it to Sheriff Daniels immediately." The conversation shifted to other topics when they realized Sarah had returned, but she had heard enough to feel a pang of concern. Was she putting Miguel and his family at risk by employing him? The thought was troubling. On the drive back to Willow Creek, with Adam beside her in the buggy, Sarah broached the subject. "I overheard you and Mr. Vasquez talking about Blackstone approaching Miguel," she said directly. "Should I be concerned?" Adam sighed, not bothering to deny the conversation. "Blackstone is trying to isolate you, make things more difficult. Miguel is a hard worker and knows the local conditions. Losing him would be a setback for you." "I won't keep Miguel if it puts him or his family in danger," Sarah said firmly. "It's his choice, Sarah," Adam pointed out. "Miguel respects you and values the opportunity to learn from you. Don't take that away from him because of Blackstone's intimidation." Sarah considered this. "You're right, but I'll speak with him, make sure he understands the risks." They rode in silence for a moment, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the road. Then Sarah asked the question that had been on her mind all day. "Why does Blackstone want my land so badly? There must be other properties he could acquire more easily." Adam glanced at her appraisingly. "You haven't looked at your uncle's property maps closely, have you?" Sarah frowned. "I've seen them, of course. The boundaries seem straightforward enough." "Look again when you get home," Adam suggested. "Particularly at the southeastern corner where the creek bends. There's a reason Samuel refused every offer Blackstone made." When they reached Willow Creek, Adam helped Sarah from the buggy and walked her to the door. "I have to ride out to check on a mare that's close to foaling," he explained. "But I'll stop by tomorrow afternoon if that's agreeable." "Of course," Sarah replied. "I always welcome your company." Their eyes met, and for a moment Sarah hoped he might kiss her. Instead, Adam took her hand and pressed it gently. "Today was important," he said quietly. "People saw us together, saw that you have connections here. It won't stop Blackstone, but it might make him more cautious." Sarah nodded, understanding that their growing relationship served a practical purpose beyond their personal feelings. Yet the warmth in Adam's eyes told her it was far more than strategy to him. "Until tomorrow, then," she said softly. After he'd gone, Sarah went to her uncle's desk and pulled out the property maps. Following Adam's suggestion, she examined the southeastern corner carefully. At first, she saw nothing unusual, just the creek winding through the property and eventually joining a larger stream that fed into the Columbia River. Then she noticed something she'd overlooked before. The creek made a sharp bend at the property line, and just before that bend, a small notation in her uncle's handwriting. "Test hole 3 promising." Intrigued, Sarah searched through her uncle's papers until she found a journal she hadn't yet had time to read thoroughly. Flipping through the pages, she found entries from last summer. June 15, 1874, completed test hole 3 near the creek bend. Results confirm my suspicions. The coal seam is substantial and appears to extend under most of the southeastern quadrant. Quality seems excellent. Will need to consult with Judge Wilson about mineral rights. June 20, 1874, Wilson confirms I hold all mineral rights. Suggests keeping findings quiet until I'm ready to develop or sell. Blackstone has been buying adjacent properties. Coincidence? Not likely. July 3, 1874. Blackstone visited today. Casual conversation about cattle prices turned to an unexpected offer for my modest ranch. Offered twice market value, declined politely. His reaction was, interesting, we'll watch developments carefully. Sarah sat back, stunned. Coal. There was coal on her property, valuable coal that Blackstone coveted. This explained everything: his persistent interest, his attempts to isolate her, the escalating pressure tactics. It also explained her uncle's cryptic comments in his final letters about her inheritance being more significant than it might appear, and his advice to look beyond the surface before making any decisions about the property. The discovery changed everything. Sarah had been thinking of Willow Creek as a ranch, a place to build a simple life away from Eastern constraints. Now she realized it was potentially much more a valuable resource that could secure her future in ways she hadn't imagined. It also made her situation considerably more dangerous. Blackstone wouldn't easily give up on acquiring such a prize, especially now that he'd invested so much in surrounding properties. His tactics were likely to grow more aggressive, not less. Sarah closed the journal, mind racing. Should she tell Adam what she'd discovered? She trusted him, but this information was potentially valuable to anyone with an interest in the territory's development. For now, she decided to keep her uncle's discovery to herself, at least until she'd had time to consider the implications fully. One thing was certain. Her decision to remain in Kennewick and claim her inheritance had just become significantly more complex, and the stakes had risen dramatically. The Founders' Day celebration arrived with perfect early summer weather, clear blue skies, and mild temperatures that had the entire town of Kennewick in festive spirits. Main Street had been decorated with bunting and flags, and tables laden with food lined the area in front of the town hall. A platform had been erected for speeches and announcements, and open space cleared for dancing later in the evening. Sarah spent the morning helping Mrs. Cooper and other ladies from the church set up the refreshment tables. She'd baked 3 apple pies for the occasion, using her mother's recipe, and was pleased by the compliments they received. Over the past days, she'd become increasingly integrated into Kennewick's daily life. She joined the Ladies' Aid Society, attended a quilting bee at the minister's house, and even substituted for Mrs. Hollister at the schoolhouse one afternoon when the teacher was indisposed. Each activity had introduced her to more townspeople and strengthened her sense of belonging. She'd also spent considerable time with Adam, both at Willow Creek and at his own ranch, River Bend. He'd shown her his horse breeding operation with evident pride, and Sarah had been impressed by his methodical approach and the quality of his stock. They'd shared meals, conversations about books and ideas, and increasingly personal stories about their pasts. Sarah had learned that Adam came from a struggling farm in Ohio, where his father's drinking had left the family in perpetual financial difficulty. He'd left at 14 to make his own way, working on progressively larger ranches and saving every penny until he had enough to claim his own land in the Washington Territory. In turn, she told him about her parents' deaths from influenza when she was 20, leaving her to raise her younger brother until his marriage 2 years later. She described her teaching position at a girls' school in Philadelphia and her growing dissatisfaction with the constraints placed on a single woman of her class and circumstances. What she hadn't shared was her discovery about the coal deposit. She decided to wait until after the celebration, not wanting to add complications to an already significant day. Tomorrow would be soon enough to discuss such weighty matters. By mid-afternoon, the The celebration was in full swing. Games had been organized for the children, and a shooting contest for the men was drawing a crowd at the edge of town. Sarah wandered through the festivities, stopping to chat with new acquaintances and admire handicrafts on display. She was examining a particularly fine piece of leatherwork when a now familiar voice spoke behind her. "That's Thomas Cooper's work. He has quite a talent." Sarah turned to find Adam watching her, his expression warming as their eyes met. He looked particularly handsome today in a crisp white shirt, dark vest, and his best denims, with his blonde hair neatly combed beneath his Stetson. "You look beautiful," he said simply, his gaze taking in her rose-colored dress with its modest bustle and lace trim. "Thank you," Sarah replied, feeling a blush rise to her cheeks. "You're quite presentable yourself, Mr. Archer." His smile deepened at her teasing tone. "High praise indeed, Miss Locke." He offered his arm. "May I escort you to the speeches?" Judge Wilson is about to begin the formal part of the celebration. Sarah placed her hand on his arm, aware of the glances they drew as they made their way to the town square. By now, most of Kennewick had observed their growing closeness, and speculation was rampant. Sarah had overheard enough fragments of conversation at the general store and post office to know that most approved of the match, seeing it as fitting that Samuel, Locke's niece, should find companionship with the neighbor he had respected. They found places near the front as Judge Wilson took the platform. The judge spoke eloquently about Kennewick's founding 20 years earlier, the hardships and triumphs of those early settlers, and his vision for the town's future. "Progress is inevitable," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the gathered crowd, "but the nature of that progress is ours to determine. Will we build a community based on cooperation and mutual respect, or will we allow outside interests to dictate our path?" The reference to Blackstone, though not explicitly named, was unmistakable. Sarah saw several people nodding in agreement, but also noted a few frowns and sidelong glances toward where Blackstone stood at the edge of the crowd, flanked as usual by his men. After the judge's speech, there were announcements of births, marriages, and achievements from the past year, followed by recognition of the oldest living founder, a sprightly woman of 78 who received enthusiastic applause. As the formal proceedings concluded, the celebration transitioned to its next phase. Tables were moved to create a dance floor, and a small band consisting of a fiddle player, a guitarist, and a banjo player began tuning their instruments. "The dancing will start after supper," Adam explained as they moved toward the food tables. "I hope you're prepared for some lively tunes. Our local musicians favor energetic numbers." "I'll follow your lead," Sarah promised, "though I may regret my corset by the end of the evening." Adam's eyes crinkled at her forthright comment. "Perhaps we can slip away for a quiet moment or two between dances," he suggested, his voice low enough that only she could hear. The implication sent a pleasant shiver through Sarah. Their relationship had remained strictly proper thus far, with nothing more intimate than a lingering handclasp or touch at the waist when he helped her into the buggy. But the attraction between them had grown steadily, and Sarah found herself increasingly aware of Adam as a man, his strength, his gentleness, the way his eyes followed her when he thought she wasn't looking. They filled plates with fried chicken, potato salad, cornbread, and other homemade delicacies, finding seats at a long table with the Vasquez family and Sheriff Daniels and his wife. Conversation flowed easily, punctuated by laughter and good-natured debate about whose peach preserves deserved the blue ribbon at the upcoming county fair. As they were finishing dessert, including a slice of Sarah's apple pie, which Adam declared the best he'd ever tasted, Victor Blackstone approached their table. The conversation immediately stilled. "Miss Locke," Blackstone said with a slight bow, "you're looking particularly charming this evening." "Thank you, Mr. Blackstone," Sarah replied coolly. "I wonder if I might have a word with you in private." He gestured toward a quieter area away from the tables, a business matter of some urgency. Before Sarah could respond, Adam spoke. "Any business concerning Miss Locke can be discussed with me present." His tone was polite but unyielding. Blackstone's smile thinned. "I wasn't aware that you were Miss Locke's legal representative, Archer." "I'm her friend," Adam said simply, "and as such, I'm concerned about her welfare." Sarah laid a hand on Adam's arm, appreciating his protectiveness, but wanting to demonstrate her own strength. "It's all right, Adam." She turned to Blackstone. "Mr. Blackstone, you may speak freely here. These are all trusted friends." Blackstone looked displeased but managed a tight smile. "Very well. I've prepared a formal offer for your property, Miss Locke, a generous one." He reached into his jacket and withdrew an envelope, 3 times the market value for comparable ranches in the area. Sarah accepted the envelope but didn't open it. "That's indeed generous, Mr. Blackstone. May I ask what motivates such an offer?" "I have plans for developing that part of the territory," he replied smoothly. "Your uncle's property is a key piece in a larger vision. A vision that includes the coal deposits in the southeastern corner?" Sarah asked quietly. A flicker of surprise crossed Blackstone's face before he could mask it. "So you know. My uncle kept detailed records," Sarah said, "and he taught me to look beyond the surface." Blackstone's expression hardened. "Then you understand the property's true value. My offer reflects that reality." "I'll review your proposal, Mr. Blackstone," Sarah said diplomatically, "but I should inform you that I'm not currently interested in selling." "Everyone has a price, Miss Locke," Blackstone replied, an edge entering his voice. "Even your esteemed uncle would have eventually seen reason had circumstances not intervened." Something in his tone made Sarah's blood run cold. "What circumstances do you mean?" Blackstone waved a dismissive hand. "Age, illness, the hardships of frontier life. They take their toll, especially on those who lack proper support." Adam stood abruptly, his chair scraping across the ground. "That sounds remarkably like a threat, Blackstone." Heads turned at nearby tables. Blackstone maintained his composure, but Sarah noticed his men shifting closer, hands hovering near their weapons. "Merely an observation, Archer. No need for dramatics." Blackstone turned his attention back to Sarah. "Consider my offer carefully, Miss Locke. Such opportunities are rarely repeated." With a slight bow, he departed, his men falling in behind him. A tense silence followed his exit. Finally, Sheriff Daniels spoke, his voice low and serious. "Sarah, I don't like to alarm you, but that man is dangerous. His reference to your uncle's passing was troubling." Sarah nodded, a cold suspicion forming. "You don't believe my uncle died of natural causes?" The sheriff exchanged glances with his wife before answering carefully. "Samuel was in good health for a man of 65. His death was unexpected. The doctor called it heart failure, which is common enough. But the timing, just after he'd rejected another of Blackstone's offers." "You think Blackstone had him killed?" Adam said flatly. "I can't prove anything," Sheriff Daniels replied, frustration evident in his tone. "But I've been investigating similar patterns across the territory. Property owners who refuse to sell, followed by convenient accidents or sudden illnesses." Sarah felt sick. The thought that her kind, generous uncle might have been murdered for his land was almost too horrible to contemplate. Yet it made a terrible kind of sense given what she now knew about Blackstone. "What should I do?" she asked quietly. "Be careful," the sheriff advised. "Don't go anywhere alone. Keep your doors locked." and consider accepting my deputy's offer to stay at Willow Creek for a few nights, just as a precaution." Sarah glanced at Adam, who nodded grimly. "The sheriff's right, Sarah. Blackstone's patience is wearing thin. Now that he knows you're aware of the coal deposits, he might decide a more direct approach is necessary." The festive atmosphere of the celebration suddenly seemed distant and artificial. Sarah looked down at the envelope in her hands, tempted to tear it into pieces. Instead, she tucked it into her reticule. Knowledge was power, and understanding exactly what Blackstone was offering might prove useful. "I won't be intimidated," she said with more confidence than she felt. "This is my home now. I won't be driven from it by threats." Adam's expression softened as he looked at her. "There's that fighting spirit I admired from the first day." He glanced toward the dance floor, where couples were beginning to gather as the band struck up a lively tune. "Shall we show Blackstone and everyone else in Kennewick exactly what we think of his threats?" Sarah understood what Adam was suggesting. By dancing, by participating openly and joyfully in the celebration, they would be making a statement that they were not cowed, not retreating, not giving Blackstone the satisfaction of disrupting their lives. "Yes," she said, rising and taking Adam's offered hand. "I believe I'd like that very much." Adam led her to the dance floor just as the fiddle player launched into an energetic reel. True to his promise earlier in the week, Adam guided Sarah through the unfamiliar steps, his hand firm at her waist, his blue eyes alight with a mixture of determination and something deeper, something that made her heart beat faster. As they moved through the patterns of the dance, Sarah gradually let her worries recede. Tomorrow would bring decisions and dangers, but tonight was for living in the moment, for celebrating not just Kennewick's founding but her own place within this community, and for acknowledging the growing certainty that her feelings for Adam Archer had become much more than friendship or gratitude. The music swirled around them, and Sarah laughed as Adam spun her through a particularly complicated turn. From the corner of her eye, she spotted Blackstone watching from the periphery, his expression dark. Let him watch, she thought defiantly. Let him see that his threats could not diminish her joy or her resolve. The evening stretched on, a kaleidoscope of dances and conversations. Sarah's feet grew tired, but her spirit remained buoyant. When the band finally struck up a waltz, the last dance of the night, Adam drew her closer than propriety strictly allowed. "I've been waiting all evening for this," he murmured, his breath warm against her ear as they moved in perfect synchrony across the floor. "For the waltz?" Sarah asked, though she knew that wasn't what he meant. "For the chance to hold you properly," he clarified, his arm tightening slightly around her waist. "To tell you without words what you've come to mean to me." Sarah's breath caught. "And what is that exactly?" Adam's eyes held hers, serious and sincere. "Everything, Sarah. You've come to mean everything." The world seemed to narrow to just the two of them, moving together beneath the stars as the music flowed around them. Sarah knew they were being watched by disapproving older matrons, by approving friends, by Blackstone with his calculating gaze, but in that moment, none of it mattered. "Adam," she said softly, "I feel the same." His smile was like sunrise after a long night. As the final notes of the waltz faded, Adam reluctantly released her from his arms but kept hold of her hand. "Walk with me," he asked. "Just to the edge of the square. I need a moment with you before we rejoin the others." Sarah nodded, allowing him to lead her away from the dispersing crowd toward a quieter spot beneath a large oak tree. The moon was high now, casting silver light across the town square and illuminating Adam's features as he turned to face her. "Sarah," he began, still holding her hand. "I know we haven't known each other long, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life than I am of my feelings for you. Sarah's heart raced. "Adam, please, let me finish," he said gently. "What I'm trying to say, probably badly, is that I love you. I think I started falling in love with you that first day at the stagecoach station, watching you fight against impossible odds with such courage. Every day since has only deepened those feelings." Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes. "Adam, I love you too. It seems impossible that it could happen so quickly, but when it's right," he finished for her, his free hand coming up to cup her cheek. "Sarah Locke, I want to court you properly with the intention of making you my wife, if you'll have me." In answer, Sarah rose on her tiptoes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, then deepened as Adam's arms encircled her, drawing her closer. When they finally parted, both were breathless. "I take that as a yes," Adam said, his voice husky. Sarah laughed softly. "A definite yes." Adam kissed her again, more briefly this time but with no less feeling. "I should get you back to Mrs. Cooper's before our absence is noticed," he said reluctantly, "though I'd much rather stay here with you until dawn." They walked back to the town square hand in hand, both glowing with the joy of newfound love acknowledged. Neither noticed the shadowy figure watching from an alleyway, nor the malevolent gaze that followed their every move. The celebration was ending, townspeople dispersing to their homes with calls of good night and promises to meet again at church the next day. Adam escorted Sarah to Mrs. Cooper's boarding house, where she had arranged to stay for the night rather than return to the isolated ranch. At the door, he kissed her once more, lingering and sweet. "I'll come by after church tomorrow," he promised. "We can ride out to Willow Creek together." Sarah nodded, reluctant to say good night but aware of Mrs. Cooper's curious gaze from the parlor window. "Until tomorrow, then." As Adam walked back toward the livery stable where he'd left his horse, his step was light despite his awareness of the dangers they still faced. He loved Sarah Locke, and miracle of miracles, she loved him too. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. What neither of them could know was how soon those challenges would arrive, or how severely their newfound love would be tested in the days to come. Sarah awoke the next morning to the sound of raised voices downstairs. Pulling on her wrapper, she hurried to the landing and heard Mrs. Cooper speaking urgently with someone at the door. "Completely destroyed," a male voice was saying. "Sheriff thinks it must have happened around midnight." "Dear Lord," Mrs. Cooper responded. "Does Sarah know yet?" Sarah's stomach clenched. She descended the stairs quickly, drawing the attention of both Mrs. Cooper and the visitor Thomas Cooper, her son. "What's happened?" Sarah asked, though she already sensed the answer. Thomas removed his hat, his expression grim. "Miss Locke, I'm afraid there's been a fire at Willow Creek." "The house is—" "Well, it's gone." Sarah gripped the banister to steady herself. "Gone, burned to the ground," Thomas confirmed. "Sheriff Daniels is out there now with some men. Adam, too, he rode out as soon as he heard." "I need to go there," Sarah said, already turning to head back upstairs and dress. "Immediately." "I'll take you," Thomas offered. "My buggy's outside." 20 minutes later, dressed and composed despite the shock, Sarah was on her way to Willow Creek. As they crested the final hill, she gasped at the sight that greeted her. Where her home had stood just yesterday morning was now a blackened ruin, wisps of smoke still rising from the charred remains. Men moved around the site, some carrying buckets of water to douse lingering embers, others examining the destruction. Adam spotted her buggy approaching and strode to meet it, his face streaked with soot, his expression a mixture of anger and concern. He helped her down, his hands gentle despite his obvious tension. "Sarah, I'm so sorry," he said, pulling her into a brief embrace. "What happened?" she asked, her voice steadier than she expected. Sheriff Daniels approached, his normally friendly face grave. "Arson, Miss Locke." "No question about it. Fire was set in at least 3 different places." "Blackstone," Sarah said with certainty. The sheriff nodded. "Most likely, though proving it will be difficult. His men all claim they were at the saloon until closing time and the bartender confirms it." He sighed heavily. "But they could have ridden out afterward, or Blackstone could have hired someone else." Sarah looked past him to the smoldering ruins. "Was anything saved?" "The barn is intact," Adam told her, a small comfort. "And the animals are safe. They were out in the pasture, but the house—" He shook his head regretfully. Sarah walked slowly toward what remained of her home, Adam at her side. The heat still emanating from the ruins made it impossible to get too close, but she could see that everything was destroyed: her clothes, her books, her uncle's papers and journals, all the personal items she'd brought from Philadelphia, even the property maps showing the coal deposits. "He thinks he's won," she said softly, "that I'll give up now and sell." Adam's jaw tightened. "What do you want to do?" Sarah turned to him, her expression resolute despite the tears threatening to spill. "I want to rebuild. Stronger, better. I want to show Blackstone and everyone else that I can't be intimidated or driven away." Pride shone in Adam's eyes. "That's my girl." He took her hands in his. "You'll stay at River Bend while we rebuild. It's not proper, strictly speaking, but under the circumstances, no one will object. Mrs. Vasquez can act as chaperone. I'll give her and Miguel the guest cabin." "You've thought of everything," Sarah said, grateful beyond words for his support. "Not quite everything," Adam admitted. "I haven't figured out yet how to prove Blackstone is behind this, but I will." He glanced over at the sheriff, who was examining something in the rubble. "We all will." Over the next few weeks, Sarah discovered the true meaning of community. The people of Kennewick rallied around her, donating clothes, household items, and most importantly, their labor. A barn raising was organized, but instead of a barn, they raised the framework for a new house larger and sturdier than the original, with Adam overseeing the construction based on improvements Samuel had planned but never implemented. Sarah stayed at River Bend as Adam had suggested, with Mrs. Vasquez installed as chaperone. The arrangement raised a few eyebrows among the more conservative townspeople, but given the circumstances and the presence of the respectable Mrs. Vasquez, most accepted it as a practical solution. True to Adam's prediction, Blackstone made another offer for the property lower than his previous one, citing the unfortunate destruction of improvements as justification for the reduced price. Sarah rejected it outright, sending back the letter with a single word written across it: "Never." Her defiance came at a cost. Anonymous threats were delivered, notes pushed under doors, whispered messages relayed by frightened townspeople. The barn at Willow Creek was vandalized twice. Miguel was accosted on the road to town and warned to find other employment. Through it all, Sarah remained resolute, refusing to be intimidated. The turning point came unexpectedly, from a direction no one anticipated. On a warm July evening, as Sarah and Adam sat on the porch at River Bend discussing plans for the nearly completed house at Willow Creek, a rider approached at a gallop. It was Deputy Wilson, the sheriff's young assistant. "Adam, Miss Locke," he called as he dismounted. "Sheriff Daniels sent me to fetch you. Something's happened in town. He says you need to come right away." "Is anyone hurt?" Sarah asked, alarmed by the deputy's urgency. "No, madam, nothing like that," Wilson assured her, "but it's important. Has to do with Blackstone." Adam didn't waste time with questions. Within minutes, he and Sarah were on horseback, following Deputy Wilson back to Kennewick at a rapid pace. They found Sheriff Daniels waiting at his office, along with Judge Wilson and a stranger, a thin, nervous-looking man in trail-worn clothes. "Sarah, Adam, thank you for coming so quickly," the sheriff said, gesturing them inside. "This is Mr. Jenkins. He has information I believe you'll want to hear." Jenkins twisted his hat in his hands, clearly uncomfortable being the center of attention. "I worked for Mr. Blackstone until 3 days ago," he began without preamble. "I was his bookkeeper." "Was?" Adam questioned. Jenkins nodded. "I quit after I found out certain things I can't have on my conscience anymore." Sheriff Daniels encouraged him to continue. "Tell them what you told us, Mr. Jenkins, about Samuel Locke." Jenkins swallowed hard. "Mr. Blackstone had him poisoned, paid the doctor to falsify the death certificate. I have the records of the payment and the name of the man who administered the poison, Hank Leary, Blackstone's enforcer." Sarah gasped, though part of her had suspected this truth since the Founders' Day celebration. "You have proof of this?" Jenkins reached into his coat and withdrew a small ledger book. "It's all in here, coded, but I can decipher it. Payments to Leary, to the doctor, to various officials Blackstone has bribed over the years." He hesitated, then added, "including the previous town marshal who looked the other way during several incidents." Judge Wilson took the ledger, examining it with a practiced eye. "This would be admissible in court, especially with Mr. Jenkins's testimony." "There's more," Jenkins said, his voice strengthening as he continued. "Blackstone ordered the fire at Willow Creek. I recorded the payment to the men who said it, not his regular employees, but drifters hired specifically for the job." He looked directly at Sarah. "He never intended for you to succeed here, Miss Locke. From the moment he learned you were coming to claim your inheritance, he planned to drive you out one way or another." The confirmation of what they had suspected was still shocking. Sarah felt Adam's hand cover hers, offering silent support. "Why are you telling us this now?" Adam asked the bookkeeper. "Why turn on Blackstone after working for him all this time?" Jenkins looked down, shame evident in his posture. "I told myself I was just keeping records, not responsible for his actions, but after the fire—" He shook his head. "I heard him planning worse. He said if the fire didn't drive you out, the next step was to ensure you met with a regrettable accident like your uncle." Sarah's blood ran cold at how casually Blackstone had planned her murder. "And you couldn't be part of that?" "No, madam, I couldn't." Jenkins met her eyes briefly before looking away again. "I've done wrong by keeping silent this long. I aim to make it right now." Sheriff Daniels stepped forward. "Based on Mr. Jenkins's evidence and testimony, Judge Wilson has issued warrants for the arrest of Blackstone, Leary, and several others. My deputies are gathering a posse as we speak." "I want to be part of it," Adam said immediately. The sheriff nodded, having anticipated this response. "I figured as much. We ride in an hour." He turned to Sarah. "Miss Locke, I'd suggest you stay at the hotel tonight under guard. Once Blackstone realizes Jenkins is missing with the ledger, he may become desperate." Sarah understood the sheriff's concern but shook her head. "I'll go back to River Bend with Mrs. Vasquez. The ranch hands will provide adequate protection." She looked at Adam. "And I'll be there when you return." Adam's expression softened. "I'll come back as soon as I can." The next few hours passed in tense preparation. Sarah returned to River Bend escorted by one of the deputies, while Adam joined the posse gathering in town. By dusk, they were ready to ride to Blackstone's estate several miles outside of Kennewick. What followed would later become part of local legend: the midnight raid on Blackstone's mansion, the brief but violent resistance offered by his men, and the final confrontation in Blackstone's study, where the man himself was found burning documents in the fireplace. Blackstone was arrested, along with Hank Leary and 4 other key associates. The evidence from Jenkins's ledger, combined with documents recovered from the partially burned papers, created an incontrovertible case against them. Within days, they were transferred to the territorial capital to await trial for murder, arson, fraud, and a host of other charges. For Sarah, the resolution brought mixed emotions: relief that justice would be served for her uncle, satisfaction that Blackstone would never threaten her or anyone else again, but also sadness that Samuel had died because of one man's greed. 2 days after the arrests, Sarah stood in the newly completed house at Willow Creek, surveying the main room with its fresh-cut pine floors and sturdy beams. The structure was larger than the original, with more windows to let in light and air. The furniture was a mix of donated pieces and new items ordered from Seattle, not yet arranged to her satisfaction but promising a comfortable home. The sound of hoofbeats outside drew her attention. Through the window, she saw Adam dismounting, his tall figure silhouetted against the afternoon sun. Her heart lifted at the sight of him as it had from the beginning. "Sarah," he called as he entered. "Are you here?" "In the main room," she answered, turning to greet him with a smile. Adam crossed to her in a few long strides, gathering her into his arms and kissing her with such tenderness it brought tears to her eyes. When they parted, he looked around appreciatively. "The house looks good. You've been busy." "Mrs. Vasquez and Anna helped arrange things," Sarah explained. "It's starting to feel like home." She studied his face, noting the lingering tension around his eyes. "Is everything all right? Has something happened with Blackstone?" Adam shook his head. "No, he's securely jailed. The trial won't be for months yet." He took her hands in his. "I've been thinking, Sarah, about the future, our future." Sarah's pulse quickened. "What about it?" Adam took a deep breath. "I want to marry you, soon. Life out here is uncertain, as we've seen all too clearly. I don't want to waste any more time being apart from you." Joy bloomed in Sarah's chest. "Are you proposing, Adam Archer?" His smile was tender. "I am. Somewhat inelegantly, perhaps, but with all my heart." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. Opening it, he revealed a delicate gold ring set with a modest but brilliant diamond. "This was my grandmother's. I'd be honored if you'd wear it as my wife." Sarah looked from the ring to Adam's earnest face, her vision blurring with tears. "Yes," she whispered. "Oh, Adam, yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then drew her into another kiss, this one deeper and more passionate than before. Sarah melted against him, feeling as though every challenge they had faced had led them inevitably to this perfect moment. When they finally parted, Adam kept his arms around her waist, his forehead resting against hers. "I was thinking we could combine our properties," he said. "River Bend and Willow Creek together would make one of the finest ranches in the territory. With the coal deposits, we could build something truly remarkable for our children and grandchildren." "Our children," Sarah repeated, loving the sound of it. "I like that vision, Adam, very much." They spent the afternoon planning their future, the wedding, small but joyful, to be held in the church in Kennewick. Their home. They would divide their time between both properties until they decided which house suited them better, and their dreams for the combined ranch. As the sun began to set, casting long golden rays through the windows of her new home, Sarah felt a profound sense of rightness. She had come west seeking a new beginning, a place to build a life on her own terms. She had found that and so much more: a community, a purpose, and a love deeper and truer than anything she could have imagined. "What are you thinking?" Adam asked, noticing her contemplative expression as they stood on the porch, watching the sunset paint the hills in hues of gold and crimson. Sarah smiled up at him, her heart full. "I was thinking about that day at the stagecoach station when I was trying to fight off those men alone. You rode up like something out of a dime novel and said I'd never have to fight alone again." Adam's arm tightened around her waist. "I meant it then and I mean it now." "I know," Sarah said softly. "And that's the most precious gift you've given me, Adam, not just your protection or your love, but your partnership. The knowledge that whatever comes, we face it together." As darkness settled over Willow Creek Ranch, Adam and Sarah remained on the porch, talking quietly about their plans and dreams. The future stretched before them, full of promise and possibility. There would be challenges ahead. Certainly life in the Washington Territory demanded resilience and determination, but they would meet them as they had met every obstacle thus far, side by side, with courage and unwavering love. 6 months later, on a crisp winter morning, Sarah Locke became Sarah Archer in a ceremony attended by most of Kennewick's residents. The church was decorated with evergreen boughs and winter berries, and Sarah wore a gown of ivory satin ordered specially from Seattle. Adam, handsome in a new suit, watched with undisguised adoration as she walked down the aisle on Judge Wilson's arm. Their vows were simple but heartfelt, promising to love, honor, and cherish each other through all the seasons of their lives together. When Reverend Thomas pronounced them husband and wife, Adam's kiss held both tenderness and passion, drawing good-natured cheers from the assembled guests. The celebration afterward at the town hall lasted well into the evening, with music, dancing, and enough food to feed the entire county. Sarah and Adam moved among their friends and neighbors, accepting congratulations and well wishes with glowing happiness. As the festivities were winding down, Sheriff Daniels approached them with news Blackstone had been convicted on all counts and sentenced to life imprisonment. Justice had been served, and a dark chapter in Kennewick's history could finally close. When they departed for their wedding night at River Bend, it was amid a shower of rice and the calling of friendly advice, some more ribald than proper. Sarah blushed but laughed, too happy to be embarrassed. The night that followed was everything she had dreamed it might be: gentle, passionate, and filled with discoveries that left her breathless and marveling at the depth of connection possible between a man and woman who truly loved each other. Over the years that followed, the Archer Ranch, combining Willow Creek and River Bend, became one of the most prosperous in the Washington Territory. The coal deposits were carefully developed, providing resources for the community's growth rather than enriching outside interests. Adam's horse breeding program gained national recognition, while Sarah established a small but excellent school on their property, ensuring that ranch children and those from surrounding homesteads received quality education. Their family grew as well. 2 years after their marriage, Sarah gave birth to a son they named Samuel, after her uncle. A daughter, Elizabeth, followed 18 months later, and another son, Matthew, 3 years after that. Their children grew strong and capable in the freedom of ranch life, guided by parents who valued both independence and responsibility. Miguel Vasquez eventually became the ranch foreman, marrying a girl from a neighboring farm and raising his own family in the guest cabin that had once housed his mother during Sarah's time as Adam's guest. His sister Anna, inspired by Sarah's example, pursued further education and returned to Kennewick as the town's schoolteacher when Mrs. Hollister retired. As Kennewick grew from a small frontier town into a thriving community, Adam and Sarah remained at its heart respected leaders who used their influence to promote fairness and opportunity for all. They welcomed newcomers, mediated disputes, and contributed generously to community projects. Their home became known for its hospitality, with Sunday dinners regularly including friends, neighbors, and occasionally travelers passing through. On their 20th wedding anniversary, as they sat on the porch of what had become their permanent home, the expanded and improved house at Willow Creek, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. "Did you ever imagine, that day at the stage-coach station, that we would end up here?" she asked Adam, whose blonde hair was now streaked with silver but whose blue eyes still held the same warmth when they looked at her. "Not in detail," he admitted, taking her hand and pressing a kiss to her palm. "But I knew even then that you were something special, a woman who fought her own battles but wasn't too proud to accept help when it was offered in the right spirit." Sarah leaned against his shoulder, content. "You know what I remember most clearly about that day? Not the fear, not even the relief when you appeared. It was what you said afterward, that I'd never have to fight alone again." Adam smiled, the lines around his eyes crinkling. "Best promise I ever made." "And kept," Sarah added softly. "Through everything, building the ranch, raising our children, all the ups and downs of 20 years together, we've faced it as partners." From inside the house came the sounds of their children's voices. Samuel, now 18 and preparing to attend university in Seattle. Elizabeth, 16 and already showing her father's gift with horses. And Matthew, 13, with his mother's quick mind and love of books. Their laughter mingled with that of Miguel's children and other young people from neighboring ranches who had gathered to celebrate the anniversary. "We've built something good here," Adam said, his voice thick with emotion. "Something that will last beyond us." "Yes," Sarah agreed, turning her face up to his for a kiss that, even after 20 years, still held the power to quicken her pulse. "And we're not finished building yet." As the sun set over the Washington Territory, painting the sky in the same golden hues that had welcomed Sarah on her first visit to Willow Creek, she knew with absolute certainty that she had found her true home not just in this place, but in the arms and heart of the man beside her, the cowboy who had promised she would never fight alone again.